Hello and welcome to Capturing and Telling Your AmeriCorps Story. It's so important for project directors to reflect and act on what they want and need to include in their project story. Stories, as we will discuss, can take many forms and impact people in many ways, and project directors are instrumental in seeing and articulating the overall project story. My name is Eric Powell, and I'm a VISTA training specialist at AmeriCorps headquarters in Washington, D.C. My role primarily focuses on orienting and training supervisors and sponsor staff, and having served as a VISTA member and a leader, I'm delighted to be speaking with you about stories and your VISTA projects.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Barbara Reynolds. I'm the Director of VISTA Training at AmeriCorps headquarters. I have the great privilege of working with Eric, along with our colleagues Andy King and Chris Hawks, on VISTA sponsor and member training each year, and I'm very happy to be with you today. So here's a look at today's agenda. We will explore what stories are and how they can be used in your project. We'll look at stories and the VISTA project lifecycle. We'll share a few recommendations and resources to strengthen your story gathering and telling. We'll also ask you to complete a short evaluation to give us some feedback for today, and then we'll take a little time at the end of our session for Q&A before we wrap up. So let's begin with a quote from Mark Turner, who's a cognitive scientist and author. Narrative imagining, or story, is the fundamental instrument of thought. Rational capacities depend upon it. It is our chief means of looking into the future or predicting, of planning, and of explaining.
Well, on a personal note, I'll say that I'm not sure that there's a better word to define story or narrative imagining, as we just heard, because that word seems to encapsulate so much in just 5 letters. But for the sake of recognizing storytelling opportunities in your VISTA project, let's explore it just a little bit. Story is defined in a number of ways that apply to our session. One definition is an account of incidents or events. We certainly hope that your project has 0 or very few incidents, but hopefully lots of events and successful happenings that can be told in its narrative to show others the progress and accomplishments. Another definition, a statement regarding the facts pertinent to a situation in question. You as the project director, your supervisors, and members are likely discovering facts and specifics about your work, the community, the circumstances regarding poverty, and more. And the VISTA project story should include some of that data and how the project is working to eradicate poverty. And one more definition, a news article or broadcast. Depending on how you tell your story and who one or more of your audiences is, you may craft the story via an article or broadcast for the news, maybe a video, a written resource. There's so many options, different ways to share details about the project's work. And as we think about the word story, here are a few synonyms that you may be familiar with. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, and some people may argue that some of these words seem more like parts of a story or maybe even not relevant. But I do show these to you because I want us to get us thinking a little bit more broadly about different ways to highlight what is occurring and what will eventually happen in your VISTA projects that relates to your story. We all know that your VISTA project serves an important purpose, and its story is absolutely essential. Among other things, you want your project story to get people to feel embraced by the story's people and community, elated about helping the community improve its situation, engaged in project activities with the community to support its work, energized and full of so much emotion that they want to get into the action, eager to get started to find out how they can be of assistance, enthusiastic about the work being done in ways that inspire others, encouraged to tell others about the project and share their details and story, enlightened through the new information and additional stories that they hear, and empowered to promote the project and become part of its important story and its future.
So I do think it's worth pausing for a second here and noting the components of an effective story in general, right? No matter what we call the thing, the story or the other thing, or the context that we're using the word. In general, good stories have some version of these components, right? At the center, there's a subject and maybe a protagonist, sometimes called a hero. Through our lens, for the purposes of AmeriCorps, the subject of the story can be an individual, a person like you, can be a community leader. The subject or the hero could also be a group, right? Like your organization or your project. Any variation of those individuals or groups can be at the center of a good story. And, a story really starts when something happens, right? When there's action that occurs to that protagonist or that hero. And in AmeriCorps, a lot of times we'll hear about a story starting or about some action being represented as something that happens in a community, like a natural disaster, the loss of an important business to that economy in that community, or a heartbreaking crime. So we have our protagonist, and then we have some action that starts. And then after that incident occurs, the protagonist will have to struggle in some way, will have to take some sort of action to overcome barriers to deal with the incident that has occurred. And the action or tension in the story really builds right there, right? It's right as the hero is in the struggle to try to handle things, like I said, like the loss of jobs if a business leaves town, or tries to handle the recovery from a natural disaster, or support a community as it's reckoning that may come after a shocking crime. So a lot of different ways that action or tension can build in the story. And then in its simplest form, ideally, right, in a good story, there'll be a resolution. The action will build, it will resolve itself. And sometimes, in certain circumstances, there can be lessons learned from that story, and they'll sometimes be described as an aha moment, right? And in really simple terms, this structure, again, this very, very basic structure of a good story, can be described as a series of events that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So, as you know, of course, they're all, and I absolutely agree, there are all kinds of stories, all types, that may fit into the simple structure I just described, but frankly, particularly when we're talking about community service or community change, the stories aren't quite that simple. They're not quite that neat. In real life, there are all kinds of different stories that occur over great periods of time. These can be personal stories, like you can see on screen, stories about you, your family, your community. In AmeriCorps, there are also, again, a variety of stories, things that capture and reflect the motivation for AmeriCorps members who are serving, the reason that they're serving in your VISTA project. There also may be stories that you have about why you do the work that you do, or your colleague or your staff are engaged in your important work at your VISTA project. And then we also know that at a lot of our sponsor partners, there's some really interesting origin stories, right? How is it that your organization came to be? Why? Why was it created, or why was your VISTA project created? So these two kind of separate sides of the coin, right? Personal stories or AmeriCorps stories, again, can in some ways fit that simple structure that I just described. And we know that it can also be a bit more complex. And in the complexity, I think there's real interest. I have a couple of stories here to share to illustrate these points. For me personally, one of my favorite stories is when my mom would talk about taking me home from the hospital when I was a baby. She was absolutely terrified, but she had a way of telling me about that experience and about her fears and the mistakes that she thought she made that were really funny. Like, she and I would laugh and kind of enjoy this reflection on her young motherhood and her new mom hijinks. And it always, our laughter and our reflection always ended up something like, can you believe we survived that, right? Ha, 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 we're so lucky. And as I grew older, that story, that personal story, really changed for me. It became less about, us, her hijinks and our survival, but the story told me so much more about my mom, about her life, who she was, and really how hard it was for her to be a young single mother, bringing home this terrifying newborn alone with no family to help her, no job, and no real support. And I didn't know those pieces of the story because she didn't really highlight them, right? She highlighted the hijinks. And I didn't really understand what the story meant about her until I grew older. And it was in my own kind of personal aha moment that I realized that story, the way that my mother told it and the time that went by, the complexity that the story kind of grew in my life, I realized that she was the hero of the story. It wasn't about our survival, right? I was a part of it, but she was the center of the story. And it was really about her courage and determination. And that was my personal aha moment. On the flip side, one of my favorite AmeriCorps stories came from a nonprofit and an AmeriCorps member I worked with in Maryland. The AmeriCorps member was working with volunteers to help people with disabilities use technology to communicate. And the first time that the AmeriCorps member saw this happen, right, in real life, she reported that a client who had lost the ability to speak some years ago was able to use this special adapted computer with a volunteer's help to speak to his wife. And his first words to her were, "I love you." And in our AmeriCorps program at that time, that story became known as the "I love you" story, of course. And it stuck with our staff and our AmeriCorps members for years. I mean, honestly, it still sticks with me. That's why I'm telling you about it now. So those are two quick examples of the different categories or types of stories that we have in our lives and that we have to draw from as we do our work together. And I just want to pause here and see if there are stories that may resonate with you, something that you reflect on frequently or something that our topic today has raised for you. And so if you could, in the chat, if you could just type in a few words to categorize or characterize the story, a story for you that means something. It could be something personal, again, as my new mom's story, or something about your work or your community, like my AmeriCorps I Love You story. But we just want to get a sense of, as we're thinking about this topic and reflecting on it, if there are particular stories for your life or your work that come to mind. I know when Eric was just starting us out a few minutes ago, some folks had typed a brief description about your VISTA projects in the chat, and they were really interesting. I really appreciated seeing just those short snippets of work that you do in your VISTA projects. And I wonder if there's anything more to say about that, again, or anything personal. So I do see that the chat is getting some answers in there just to help motivate me to obtain my citizenship. Wow, thank you, Lucio. Yep, the starfish story, I've heard that one as well, Amanda, and that absolutely resonates with me. Yep, oh, I see someone posted to me, I love the story about how my parents met. I've definitely heard personally some variations of that as well. Yep, the story of your growth as an activist. Stone Soup, yep, Lark, I've heard that one as well. Yeah, thank you for those. I mean, I think if there are others that you are thinking of, or if you're typing right now, please continue to drop those comments in the chat. I think that is, for us, I think beginning at a place for you personally, again, to think about stories in your work that are really resonant or in your personal life. I think that's a good way to have connection to the concepts that we're talking about as well. So thank you for those responses. So stories, of course, as we've noted, can take many forms, right? And the story of your VISTA project can be shared in all kinds of ways. I'm sure they are, right? You may put them in writing, as Eric noted earlier, for the media or for other purposes. You may tell your stories like folk tales or heroic tales at events that you hold, or stories of your project or your community may appear as art, right? Some form of art. There are all kinds of ways that stories may appear. And as you look at your VISTA project, of course, you can customize your story to different audiences to create a unique feeling or emotion with the story, some of those E's that Eric was sharing just a few minutes ago. And your stories can help encourage and inspire folks who hear them to reflect on their own experiences, right? And share those anecdotes, similar to my question to you a moment ago about your favorite story. So no matter how this looks for your particular project, we know that this effort and this energy around capturing and telling your stories are really powerful connections to our work and to our communities.
So I want to mention that VISTA projects follow a similar life cycle, and within that life cycle, each project has many opportunities to recognize and build upon moments that become part of its story. Various things that occur and different situations that arise as part of a project can have a significant impact on the tale you tell. So as a refresher, you probably know that VISTA projects involve and include individuals who have their own personal story, like many of you have already shared, as well as a story of how they are connected to the VISTA project and the organization. VISTA projects connect with a community that has a unique story of its own through history, people, different situations, and a whole lot more. They're also part of the organization and its story, which is likely tied to the organization's mission, vision, and goals. VISTA projects, of course, have members and leaders who come with their own individual story, stories of who they are, how they heard about your project, and, very powerful, why they applied to your specific project. And also, VISTA projects are managed by the VISTA Project Director. And yes, you have a story to tell separate from and connected to your VISTA project. Since I mentioned the VISTA the VISTA project lifecycle, I'll show you the screen and say that each person's story is important and also may change at various points throughout the project and member life cycles. This session is focusing on the VISTA project story, and what you see on the screen is a brief abridged snapshot of the general project lifecycle that includes major actions taken by the sponsoring VISTA project. We know that these steps are not always linear necessarily. Some of them are repeated, such as you recruit, and then you have VISTAs that leave, and then you recruit again. So it's an ongoing activity. But we do show you this to help you understand that every part of the project lifecycle is part of your project story. And as you can see, new VISTA project must first submit a concept paper and a project application that, in a sense, outline their anticipated story and how they will create that story over time. From the full project lifecycle, let's focus specifically on a few key activities that VISTA sponsors complete each year and how they may allow you to capture and/or tell your project story. These are VISTA assignment descriptions, or VADs, service opportunity listings, VISTA member recruitment, member management while they are serving, transitioning members out of service, capturing data and stories in reports, and completing project closeout. On the screen now, you can see a snapshot of the resource handout that accompanies today's webinar. You can access the handout on the VISTA campus and in the chat now. And in this document, we include key development questions for you and your project team to consider, as well as opportunities and challenges for using each phase of the project lifecycle to capture and tell your story.
So at this point, I definitely want to acknowledge how labor-intensive managing a VISTA project is, right? We're talking to project directors, and I know there are many things that you have to do in this role, along with all the rest of your job, not just the VISTA parts. And many of the things that Eric and I are talking about today have real technical requirements for creating and submitting, and a lot of those live in eGrants or live in my AmeriCorps. And so at times, when you're in your VISTA project director role, you may feel like this, right? You may feel like you're buried under a mountain of VISTA work or VISTA tasks, at least virtually buried. I hope no one at this point has this kind of a mountain of paper on your desk, your physical desk. But I think it's absolutely true and in many ways unavoidable that the VISTA project life cycle is labor intensive, and there's so many steps and there's so much to cover in it. And I think for this discussion, I want to try to again, shift our thinking away from this heavy technical or paperwork heavy reality and try to think of how our VISTA projects and the tasks that are part of that life cycle that Erica was just reviewing, how they actually can also help you become a super storyteller, right? Or a super recruiter for your program. And hopefully doing some of this together today will help you break away from being a process coordinator or, a VISTA paperwork coordinator. So what can that even look like, right? How could we leave the labor-intensive world of e-grants and use some of that information for storytelling? Well, first let's consider my old friends, my beloved VISTA assignment description or VAD. As you know, but just as a reminder, all VADs have 3 parts. They've got the project goal, its objectives, and VISTA member activities. Now, within this simple structure, where do you think the stories are? Where do you think within a VISTA assignment description, within these 3 components, where could you or your project, maybe not you personally, but those who write the VISTA assignment descriptions, where could you communicate some of your project story? That is, where could you infuse an emotional element that can help potential VISTA members, as well as your own staff, right? The VAD is a multi-purpose tool. It's a friend for everyone. How can those folks who use it and see the way that your project serves your community? And I see a couple of folks have typed some answers in the chat. If you haven't yet, just take a second and let me know, where do you think of these 3 components in the VAD, where are the storytelling opportunities? Where can you convey some of this energy? Yep, I see Leora says goal, definitely, maybe, and objectives too. Yep, project goal and objectives. Yep, thanks, Emily, I appreciate that. Goal, definitely goal mostly, yeah. I mean, I think it's right at the top of the VAD, right? The project goal, so it's a juicy placement if we're going to try to capture some emotion and capture some energy for people to connect with your project. The goal is a perfect place to do that. I mean, I think interestingly, it can be any of these 3. It can be all of these 3. But I definitely I echo many of the comments in the chat that the project goal, if you are trying to balance your precious time, or the author of your VISTA assignment description, they have a limited amount of time. Starting and focusing on that project goal section of the VAD, I think that is a really good investment. Yeah. So thanks for sharing those. Thanks for adding those comments in the chat.
It's absolutely true that a VAD can include parts of your project story, as many of you already mentioned, in any or all of its components. So here's an example of a project goal that I think displays a number of storytelling elements. Please note that this example and the next few that we're going to share are not from actual projects, but they are based on VISTA projects. So Barbara and I did edit them to demonstrate the training content today. We also changed the names that you'll see. In this example, the goal grabs your attention right away. It empowers veterans to grow food, community, and each other. Just that one sentence contains a powerful part of your VISTA project story. And here's an example of a list of member activities that shows some details. The work the VISTA member will do, like recruiting volunteers and designing training. It also conveys some of the ease of storytelling that we talked about earlier. This list could make the reader feel encouraged about the potential of this VISTA service opportunity and enthusiastic about the mission of the VISTA project to support veterans.
All right, so next up, within the VISTA project lifecycle, the next chance, or another chance, you have to tell your AmeriCorps story is in your service opportunity listing. And as you know, once the VISTA assignment descriptions are written and they are reviewed and approved by our AmeriCorps regional staff, then VISTA sponsors take that information and adapt it and post the service opportunity listing to recruit VISTA members in the My AmeriCorps portal. And this to me is one really pure task in the project lifecycle. And by that I mean opportunity listings are entirely about recruitment, right? That's all they do. They live to help you recruit your Vista applicants and Vista members. And I think I've seen really great opportunity listings strike a balance between providing some minimal logistical details, right? Just enough of the basic facts about the position to help folks decide whether or not they want to apply, or at least whether or not they want to find out more about the Vista position. So things like the start and end dates, of course, of the service, the location or the community served, and the exact details of the timing for the position. Along with those important details, great opportunity listings also provide enticing information in just a few words, again, with the intention of inspiring folks to at least find out more about the position, if not actually apply for it. So what does that look like? All opportunity listings have two-line teasers. That's the title of the field in My AmeriCorps. That is part of the service opportunity listing. They're like headlines, if you will, in My AmeriCorps, and they are visible to anyone who is cruising the My AmeriCorps portal and looking for service opportunities. And so, again, for that reason, even within the kind of preciousness of the service opportunity listing, the two-line teaser is a particularly good place for your eyes, your energy, and your kind of time, if you're looking to maximize your investment of time. I think the two-line teaser is a really valuable resource for you. It's short, of course, it's a teaser. Hopefully it can be inspiring. And as I said, all eyes will see this. People cannot miss it. The two-line teasers are always visible. So the example on screen connects to the project goal and the member activities that Eric just discussed a few minutes ago. And here we can see in this two-line teaser, we see that it contains very similar information, right? Very similar information to the goal for this Warriors Who Garden project, as well as the list of member activities. We see in the teaser, again, we're recruiting veterans to volunteer. We are going to be building their job skills, distributing food, and expanding resources. For me, I think the difference here and why this teaser is potentially very helpful to capture eyeballs in the portal is that it personalizes this opportunity, right? It puts a potential Vista member, or, again, at least an applicant, someone who might want to learn more and might want to apply for this position, puts them in the story by using the language right at the beginning: help veterans succeed. It's an invitation: come with us, help these veterans succeed. And also, as our Vista member, right, it launches into the ways that this organization will help veterans succeed, and how the Vista member is a part of that story already, right here, right at the beginning of this two-line teaser. And it does it in 31 words. This is a really brief a snapshot, again, a headline, if you will, for this position. So here's another example of a two-line teaser, and I'm going to ask what you think of this one when you read these words or you hear me read them. If you could, in the chat, just drop in the first word that comes to mind as you hear this. How does this strike your ears? At Sheltering Our Neighbors, we believe all Americans should have the same access to safe housing and safe communities. Our Vista member will help us reach our most vulnerable neighbors and surround them with a network of love by leading service projects, raising money and in-kind donations, and recruiting local businesses to provide critical support. So this teaser is a little bit longer, right? It clocks in at 55 words, so there's a little more here than the Warriors Who Garden example. But what do you think about this? Enticing, I think Patricia says. Inviting. Yeah, Asate, I hope so. I hope that is inspirational yet meaty. Oh, Ian, nice. I think that's kind of the bell ringer right there. That's what you're going for a two-line teaser. Inspirational and meaty. Yeah, purposeful. Fulfilling. I hope so too, Lauren. Yeah, I hope it conveys a sense of help, like how the community wants to help folks, as well as how this VISTA member can help. I think that is, for me, what really struck me about this particular example. Yeah, caring and supportive, Emily, I see that, agreed. I think that's right. I appreciate all of those. I mean, I think it is, for me, this example, I echo your comments. It makes me feel encouraged, right? It seems like just from these 55 words, that this could be a really powerful service opportunity. I mean, I'm intrigued, tell me more. I think it offers some detail about the actual work that a VISTA member would be doing, the member service activities. Doesn't go too far down that path, but just as enough to give me a sense that as this VISTA, I would get to be doing different things, really diverse activities, and I'm intrigued. I want to know more about that. And it appears to me from the language that this item uses that it's a community-based and kind of a community uplifting approach, right, to helping people in this community who need it. And I'm all over that. You had me at hello in this one. I would definitely want to read more. If I saw this TwoLine teaser in the portal, I would want to know more about this particular opportunity.
I totally agree with you, Barbara. I would totally apply to that project. So let's do it. So far we've looked at VADs and opportunity listings. Again, these are requirements for all sponsors, and they do live in eGrants. Once we're out of eGrants and we're recruiting VISTA members, there's an infinite number of opportunities to tell your project story. So here's another question for you to consider, and please share your responses in the chat. Again, making sure you send your response to everyone. The question is, what opportunities do you see to tell your project story during member recruitment? Are there any tools or processes that you could use that demonstrate your project story? I know recruitment is huge for all projects, not just because you have to recruit to get members, but there's different scenarios around recruitment and interviewing and reviewing applications. And so we're just curious about, throughout all of the recruitment process, are there any, and we assume there are, opportunities that you see to tell your project story at any phase during the recruitment process? Go ahead and type your response in the chat. I see quite a few are coming in. A couple of them that I'll read off are doing campaign presentations. I'm assuming that could be in person or virtually, but really presenting and showcasing what the story is all about. Providing examples of experiences, that's incredibly powerful, especially if it's the VISTA member, or if there's a current VISTA member or a VISTA alumni who is helping to recruit, and they're sharing their personal experience about how they dealt with the VISTA project. That can go a long way to encourage more people to apply and to get additional recruits. These responses are great, and I know some people have mentioned that they're still not sure, but they think there's a lot of opportunities. I see showing success stories from people who are helped. Absolutely, getting the community directly involved, the recipients of the service, helping them to share their story and be part of the VISTA project story. And then I also see posting quotes and pictures on Facebook and social media to show success of current members and how much they love their service. See, you already know this information. We don't even need to talk to you, but this is truly great, because this truly does talk about why the community is so important, why VISTA service is so important, and how all of those elements are critical to telling your project story. So if you have any other ideas, certainly please keep them coming, because we love to see them, and I'm sure they might be helpful to you in thinking about how else you can tell your project story. But thank you for those who have responded. And as I mentioned earlier, it's okay if you don't have an answer right this minute. You may take time, it may take a couple of days, but as you're talking with your project staff and members and alumni, we do encourage you to begin thinking about this on your own as well as with other staff, because it'll help you reach your project goals and help you think about how to craft your project story.
So I hope those brief examples, particularly the VADs and the TwoLine teasers, some of the service opportunity listings, and then the variety of ideas and contributions that you put in the chat about recruitment. I hope that that's helpful as you're thinking about, again, all of the different parts of the project lifecycle and where the opportunities exist to capture and then to tell the stories as well. I want to highlight one last step in the project lifecycle today, and it's a bit of an odd duck, I would say. I don't know that this pops to people's minds immediately when we're talking about storytelling, but I think it is a place where over time, you may be able to develop very strong stories about your VISTA projects and the AmeriCorps members who serve with you. And that is in the reporting around your VISTA project activities. I think reports, however they occur, can offer a steady supply of material to craft into your project stories. A few minutes ago, I shared with you the I Love You story from my AmeriCorps program. And I first saw that story in a mid-year report from the AmeriCorps member herself, who witnessed the interaction between the gentleman who was using the adaptive equipment and his wife and the volunteer that the AmeriCorps member was working with. In my Maryland program, all of our members were required to submit short reports, very brief, I think no more than 3 pages, that included updates on progress towards their performance measures for their projects, their highlights, the things that had happened to them in the first half of the year that were highlights, and then a summary of any challenges that they had experienced in the first half of their year. And so this particular AmeriCorps member, of course, shared the I Love You story as a highlight. And it was buried like near the bottom of page 3 of this report. I remember it vividly because I was reading it along with the other reports on my treadmill, late one afternoon, and almost fell down because I thought it was such a delightful surprise, and it just came out of nowhere. And I'm still not sure now if I would have heard that story if we didn't require those mid-year reports. And so for that particular program, the reporting requirement made sense, and the cycle of collecting that information in the reports and then processing it over time really made sense for us. And we were able to gather wonderful material, because I think the I Love You story in so many ways is such a diamond. I mean, it captures the essence of what that project was, right? Helping people who had suffered some sort of damage to their vocal cords or, their physical ability to communicate, helping them communicate. But then it also captured the AmeriCorps members' experience of seeing that and helping to facilitate that. So again, I feel like that was such a sweet, very brief, charming story that only came about because we had the reports. And I do want to say, I know your approach to reporting in your particular VISTA project is your own, and it may not fit for you to have a similar kind of required written document that all of your VISTA members submit. Everyone's approach to reporting is different, and that is absolutely fine. That's as it should be. I'm definitely not suggesting that you create something new or, add any more work to your already labor-intensive VISTA management tasks. I am suggesting, if you haven't, right, and if you have the time, that you consider how you do collect information in reports or in some sort of mechanism for yourself, or that your VISTA members may do, how you do that routinely, and just see if there's any way to incorporate an element of reflection, right? An element in that reporting mechanism that could give you some sort of story material. Again, thinking about, the hero and the inciting incident and the struggle and the resolution. Is there any way that you can fold that in, again, if you haven't already? Just like the question in my member's mid-year report about her highlights that she had to submit.
We've looked at quite a bit today, starting with the essence of stories and how they may be captured and told as part of the annual VISTA project lifecycle. But before we move on to the next agenda, I'm going to pause for a quick refresher. So in just a couple of seconds, you should see a poll appear on your screen. And the question we're asking is, what are 3 of the 6 components of a story? You can see the 4 options on the screen. And in just a second, we're going to play some music for about 30 or 45 seconds and let you put your response, but you can only select one response. We ask you to go ahead and do that now, and we will be back with you in about 35 seconds. Give you just a couple of more quick seconds as you're finishing up. I think a few more people are responding now. So I see some people are unable to see the poll. We'll try to work out those technical difficulties quickly, but if you can't see the poll, you can type in the chat. I'll just quickly read it off. What are 3 of the 6 components of a story? The first option is setting, problem, and struggle. Option number 2 is steps, challenges, and people. Option number 3, inciting incident, barriers, and resolution. And option number 4, feelings, adversaries, and steps taken. Apologies for any technical difficulties on our end, but we'll give you just a couple more seconds to respond. Thank you for your patience. And again, if you can't access the poll, hopefully you can type in the chat. So let's go ahead and close the poll. Thank you to those who were able to respond and see the question and give us the answer. So the majority of people said the answer was number 3, inciting incident, barriers, and resolution. And I will say, for those of you who want to know the answer, that is the correct answer, inciting incident, barriers, and resolution. So great job for those of you who got it wrong. No problem, you'll have access to the slides later, so you can review the material, but thank you for completing that quick activity. We do really hope that this helps the concept stick with you as we turn to the final portion of the agenda today. So very quickly, we'll review a few recommendations and resources before we get to the questions and answers. So some tips we have for you. To start off, we recommend that you start working on capturing and gathering information now and incorporate it throughout all aspects of the project lifecycle. Make sure you encourage your supervisors, your members, your community members, and anyone else connected with your VISTA project to document their personal story and share that with you, because that'll make your job easier and so much more fun to see their stories and figure out ways to incorporate those stories into the larger project story. And as you draft and create an overall project story, make sure that you customize it to various audiences. We know it's great to have a general project story with all the details, just like a comprehensive resume, but it's also important to have slight variations and tweak it to different audiences that you may come in contact with. Also, your project story can and should be used for many purposes. The story you tell potential member applicants will probably be a little bit different than the information in the story that you tell when you apply for grants and funds, which also may be different from the story you tell people in the community who need to continue the sustainable activities. And last but certainly not least, enjoy the journey. As you've heard earlier from all of you, from Barbara, from myself, stories have so much meaning, so have fun with it. So when you go onto the Vista campus, as a quick reminder, click on Catalog in the menu, and you can locate the learning path titled Vista Member Recruitment. I mentioned this one specifically because we were talking about recruitment earlier and how there's so much storytelling involved in all aspects of recruitment. So this is one way you can get more information, more details, to help you think more broadly about your Vista project story and how recruitment is more than just getting individuals to apply and serve. Recruitment specifically involves getting organizations, volunteers, funders, and others interested in partnering with your project and hearing your important project story. We also encourage you, when you have a minute, to navigate to Vista Connect. I think some of you have already started going there, which is great. You can communicate with the supervisors group, over 1,200 people strong, and you'll be able to see recent posts from supervisors. Supervisors have talked for a long time about wanting to connect with each other, wanting to network with their peers and brainstorm creative ideas and all of that. So this gives you the opportunity to create new discussion threads, respond to other postings, make new friends, and meet your colleagues. With the information that you now have about stories, you may make connections with other supervisors who have similar project stories and resources that can help you. So go ahead and use Vista Connect to easily and quickly start telling a small part of your project story. As a review, in this session, we've covered 3 of our 4 agenda items, and next, we're going to ask you to complete a quick but very important evaluation of this session, and then we'll open up for questions. So you should see a link in the chat in a minute. We strongly love seeing your feedback. We read it, we review it, we try to improve these sessions and think about future sessions. So please take just 3 or 4 minutes and share your honest feedback about this presentation. It means a lot. It really does. And while you're completing the survey, excuse me, I will mention our next monthly webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, December 14th, titled Working with the Vista Assignment Description and Your Members. You'll get more information about that later, but we encourage you, if you want to know how to incorporate the VAD and what your members are doing and all of that information about how it all works together, join the session and invite others to join as well. And then, of course, to access their webinar description and link, you can visit the Vista campus, go to the calendar, and we'll show you how to do that on the next slide. Once you're on the calendar, simply in the Vista campus account, simply click on the calendar icon in the main menu. It'll display the calendar for the current month, and then you can toggle to whatever month you need to, in this case, December. Click on a date that has a blue dot, for example, December 14th, and then that will show you the title, date, and time, and the audience for the webinar that appears in the blue banner. And then you just simply click on the title of the event to see the details for the webinar and be able to register directly there. So quick and easy, and allows you to explore more of the Vista campus. So we have a few minutes to take some of your questions. I know there was one question that came in earlier that I will speak to, and then I'll turn it to Barbara to see if she saw any others come in. Earlier, there was a question that came in about, is there a way to extend the word limit on the project goal section? Sometimes we struggle to limit the goal to the word limit. I will say a couple of quick things. One, in terms of the project goal, sometimes the project goal appears in different areas. There's obviously a section where the project goal appears in the Vista assignment description. Part of the project goal appears way back in the project application and a few other places. But to my knowledge, at least currently, there's not a way to expand the word limit, at least not for the immediate future. And part of that, briefly, is because we know that your Vista project has a lot to tell, a lot of goals, typically more than one goal. And we don't want to expand the word limit too much, because then people will write a dissertation, which is great storytelling, but we wanted to keep, especially the project goal in the VAD, we wanted it to be manageable so that when the Vista member sees it, they at least have a snapshot of what they're doing. So I would just quickly recommend, within the constraints that we currently have, the one positive is that it allows you to try to craft the project goal as part of your story in a succinct way. You can still expand on the project goal somewhere else and link the Vista member to it, but at least in the Vista assignment description, we want it to be brief but substantial enough that gives the Vista member the overall information they need. So let me turn it to Barbara to see if she either has other comments to that question or if she saw other comments and questions that came in.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that popped in my mind, Eric, when I saw that question a few minutes ago about the word limit is just the kind of system limitations we have in the portal and the grants that generally we're not able to make a lot of structural changes. But I like the frame that you give it. There's a positive spin to be seen. There's a silver lining to that dark e-grants cloud of technology. I think that's definitely true. I did have a couple of other questions I saw. One person asked if there were any storytelling resources available from headquarters, and you were drawing folks' attention to our campus training material earlier, and that's awesome. I would also add to that, if you're not aware, there is a stories section on AmeriCorps.gov on the AmeriCorps organization's website. If you go to that page and select Newsroom at the top of the banner of the AmeriCorps.gov website, it'll take you immediately to AmeriCorps stories. And they're snippets. When I look at those resources on AmeriCorps.gov, they are, more times than not, they're quotes from members who've served, AmeriCorps members, or for AmeriCorps senior volunteers. But there's some good stuff there. I think there's some interesting ways that those quotes may be used, or they may spark something for you or for your staff or your VISTA members that could be useful. So again, that's AmeriCorps.gov Newsroom. Yep, and I think Eric just put that in the chat as well. I think that is very useful. And then there was a comment earlier about other training on storytelling. And I would like very much to take this opportunity to plug a resource that I think is phenomenal. There's a gentleman, a trainer, a writer, and a longtime national service supporter, a gentleman named Andy Goodman, and he runs something called the Goodman Center. And at the Goodman Center, there's a mix of free resources and free trainings. And then there are also some materials that cost money. So I just want to acknowledge that some of the material around storytelling is free, and then some of it, there's a cost. But he has several different courses on storytelling, and one of them I think is so powerful. It's on the ethics of storytelling and how working in the communities where we often work in AmeriCorps and National Service, that there's some real sensitivities around the kind of information that we could or should, quite frankly, be gathering and sharing publicly about the folks that we work with. And so I just really like that approach in the training again at the Goodman Center. And I think that's such an important issue. And so I would just encourage you, if this activity of capturing your AmeriCorps story or crafting your AmeriCorps stories is something that you think you'd like to build on with your particular team. Certainly, VISTA resources are always important. Again, the AmeriCorps.gov story snippets I think are really helpful. And for a deeper kind of skills building dive, I would highly recommend the Andy Goodman trainings. And again, Eric, thank you. I see you've posted that in the chat as well. So those were the two. Yeah, go ahead. Those were the two questions that I saw pop up.
No, those were great. And I'll just wait one more minute to see if there's additional questions. But I was going to say, remember, as we mentioned earlier, that you don't, even though the project story is kind of under the umbrella of the role of the project director, don't feel like you have to do this alone. And one of the links I posted earlier is where your current members or recent alumni can share their story with AmeriCorps in general. But remember, not only each part of your project is part of your story, but each person, members, leaders, community members, board of directors, each person that's connected to your project is part of that story. So utilize them to help you compile the story, because it's important to have them involved, especially as people typed in the chat earlier, getting snippets from the community and getting the actual recipients of the services to be involved and talk about how meaningful it is to them. So I don't see any other questions coming in, so I think we can go ahead and move to the final couple of slides. As you do think about your own personal story, and especially the story of your VISTA project and your community, I want to close with this quote by author Libba Bray. "There is no greater power on this earth than story." So in closing, I will say, let your project's story shine. Share it with your community and the world, and be sure to remind yourself and your members and the community and everyone associated with the VISTA project that you are all part of this amazing, incredible, and life-changing story. So thank you so much to so many people, including Barbara, for the bulk of the content of this presentation. Great job, Barbara, and thank you for co-presenting. Thank you to Mike Dietz and Steve Gray at LSI for helping us manage Zoom and all their wonderful support. Thank you, of course, in your role as project director and all the work that you do to keep your VISTA project going, your members, your leaders, everyone. It's powerful, it's important, and your story is critical to tell. So from all of us here at AmeriCorps headquarters and the VISTA program, thank you so much for everything you do. Continue to do great work, and we will hopefully see you next month. Thank you, thank you, thank you.